What are we going to do today, Dennis?
The same thing we do every day, Austin. Try to indoctrinate the world.
Oh, man. So how are things going?
Things are going good. As you know, I'm sort of still battling a really nasty cold.
Yeah. You've been sick for what? Almost a week.
Yeah. It's been about a week now.
Yeah, and you're hacking, and you were preaching, and battling the Jumanji flu.
The Jumanji flu. I love it.
Yeah, no good.
I love it.
Well, I don't know. So have you been just lounging around the house trying to get better, or are you just still pushing through doing your daily stuff?
I'm just pushing through doing my daily stuff. One thing about me is I do not like to be in bed doing nothing.
Really? You have to be really sick.
I have to be on death's door.
Yeah.
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 I just
See, I'm kind of the opposite. I was like, well, here's a good opportunity to play some video games. Watch more movies.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, we don't have a mute button, so people are going to be getting nice and close with your phlegm.
Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry.
It's all right. All right, so, what is the item of the week? What was something in your ailment that happened since last time we recorded that you're like, I want to share this. This is your show and tell.
Okay, my show and tell. I think the biggest thing for me is how some germs or some bacteria can reduce a man to a sniveling childhood state.
I mean, seriously. Well, you know what? I don't know. Maybe this is my naivete coming out, but I really would have thought by this point in our technological advance, we would conquer these colds. I mean, we have flu shots, but those are. They're just not doing, I think, quite. And they admit that, and they know that. I mean, they're kind of guessing at the strands, but no, you're right.
It's just it's the weirdest. I mean, your question sort of sparked something that's been sort of going on in my mind. No matter how technologically advanced we get, it just seems like we're one step behind the creator. It's just like he could still throw something in there and just upset the apple cart anytime he wants.
So I'm curious, do you think, a lot of people think that with DNA manipulation or this or that, we'll finally get to a point where we can prolong human life extraordinarily long. Do you think that'll happen?
I mean, yes.
You do? Okay. So the curse won't keep people at 80 years.
I think that the curse unmanipulated keeps man at that age, but I think by virtue of us being made in the image of God, God sort of gives us the ability to have exercise dominion over creation, and I would also say the effects and impacts of creation. Like, that's why we don't all die when there's a earthquake or or a storm, a bad storm. Like we have ways of mitigating the impact of
a heart transplant.
Heart transplants. Lung transplants.
Yeah.
They can transplant anything.
I mean, it's amazing. Well, you know what? This is funny because my son was showing me they're supposedly in Russia, or what's it called now? The USSR or whatever, the Soviet Union. There we go. Whatever it's called now. As a kid, in the 80s, that's the Russians.
The Russians.
That's
the
what
Russians.
That's what it is to me. But he said there's someone over there who's terminally ill, and they've been prepping, and they're going to be doing it soon. They're going to try the first head transplant.
I saw that. That's legit.
Okay. Now,
I'm sorry.
Is this possible, you think?
Well, okay, first of all, I would say, I'm not a medical doctor, but I am interested in science fiction, and I'm also interested in medical technology.
Yeah.
That's something kind of weird, but I do. I could see it possibly happening, because remember, all you need is a viable body.
Yeah. I mean, if a heart works. Why not a whole body?
Why not the whole body? All you need is viable body, viable organs. And as far as the head transplant, I mean, people. But by the way, people get, have their, what do you call that thing? Their spinal cord severed, and they're still able to keep them alive.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's weird, but I think they can do it.
They did it to a monkey. And
there you go.
And the monkey was, I mean, it wasn't very coherent, but it would nibble on. It didn't live very long, but it did nibble on like a stick.
It did?
Yeah, there's footage. It's really gross.
Well, I remember reading in a history book, and I wish I'd kind of tracked this down. But I remember reading in a history book, this guy wanted to know if someone could still hear after they got their head severed. And it was during the time of the French Revolution. Did you remember that story?
Stuff you should know. Did you listen to that one?
No,
I did. They did a whole thing on decapitation, like how awake are you for how long?
Yeah.
Freaked me out.
Yeah,
because you are.
Well, yeah, and apparently the guy blinked his
Yes.
his
Can
eyes.
you understand? He blinked, and he'd be like, "John," and his eyes were glazing over. John, and he'd wake up a little bit more.
Oh my goodness!
That is
insane.
So, I mean, can you imagine though? Where this could, on the back of your driver's license, you're an organ donor. What if you're like a body donor? And just think of the weird things that could happen in a dystopian future. Instead of women getting breast augmentation, it's like, well, I just want a whole new body. I'm just going to slap my head on a new body. I mean, think of the weird things.
Or
like an athlete.
Yeah.
You put some 400-pound guy's head on some athlete's body, and suddenly he's a stud.
He's a stud. Like it's like Captain America all over again.
Okay, Captain. Oh yeah. Okay, I'm following. I'm like, what? That's right.
Oh man, that's awesome.
All right, well, I'm going to move this on since people don't want to hear about decapitation. My item of the week. Okay, I started N.T. Wright's book, The Day the Revolution Began. Are you familiar with this book?
No, I have not.
It's basically a book on the cross, the atonement, and...
I read his book on the resurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's his latest book that came out, The Day the Revolution Began, and I can't remember the subtitle. Mm-hmm. I got about maybe 2 hours into the book. It was 15 hours. I couldn't handle it anymore.
Why?
It was driving me bonkers.
Really?
Yes. N.T. Wright. Okay. I don't know why he feels compelled. In my mind, he does two things that were just driving. And I'm a guy who can endure a lot. I listen to all kinds of junk.
That's true.
But for some reason, this was pushing my buttons because, one, I felt like he kept making caricatures of penal substitution. Like, all these people, all the cross is thought about as Jesus dying for your sins so you can go to heaven. It's like, yeah? Now, in all fairness, in classical N.T. Wright kind of way, he wouldn't deny that, but he would talk about it in almost such a demeaning or at least background manner that it was driving me bonkers.
Yeah.
And that's really my second issue is he seems to take background issues and pull them to the foreground and take foreground issues and background them. Because he really wanted to talk about how the cross reinstitutes our priestly vocation on the earth. And I go, okay, is that a real thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
But is that
why, like, did Jesus say, I came to reinstitute your...
Right. Behold, the Lamb of God who reinstates the vocation of the priest. Right? I mean... So... I don't know. Maybe I'll be able to go back to it, but let me put it this way. I got my credit back and I uninstalled the book. Maybe I'll get it again.
Bravo!
I was
you just
upset.
weren't going to happen anymore.
I couldn't.
I wish our audience could see the look on your face right before you started talking about that.
Seriously. I haven't had something do that to me for a while, but yeah.
All right.
Well done, N.T.
Yes
Wright.
or no?
Yeah, yes or no. What do you got?
All right, here it is. Do you genuinely believe in free and fair elections when we want only one side to win every time? Do you?
Me personally.
Yeah, do you personally, if you say that you believe in free and fair elections that a Democrat can win, or a Republican can win, or Greenpeace can win, or whoever can win.
Yeah.
But you only want one side to win.
Yeah.
Do you think that you still believe in free and fair elections?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Okay.
I guess I'm not feeling the tension here. I'll be curious. Are you going to answer yes or no?
So I'm gonna answer no. I don't think you can. I don't think you can.
Okay.
So we can explain it afterwards.
Yeah, I'll be curious because when you texted me that question, I'm like, oh yeah, of course.
Oh,
so now maybe I'm not thinking about it the way you would have.
I just don't think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, I have one for you.
Okay, good.
I didn't tell you this beforehand.
Okay.
And this will segue nicely.
Oh my goodness.
Have you ever threatened to smash a man's hand with a hammer in an abandoned building?
How about I answer that one off camera?
But my guess is no.
No.
But
Never.
could you ever imagine yourself being driven to do it?
Man,
Could you ever imagine yourself being driven to do it? I'm saying yes.
I can see. Generally, my principle, I'm a nonviolent man.
Are you a pacifist?
I wouldn't call myself a pacifist. I have committed in my heart on multiple occasions that if my country called on me to pick up, the sword essentially and defend, I would only do it for defense purpose, never for nation building.
Okay.
That was my philosophy. Even this might sound weird, but even as a kid, I would not fight a war if it's just purely for taking other people's land. But I would pick up the sword to fight for my own
So
country.
what would you do? Would you be willing to leave the country then if you felt like it was a profoundly unjust war?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So to answer your question, yes, I could see a scenario where if I had a bad guy and I was in an abandoned building and I had a hammer, I would threaten to both hands.
You're a lover, not a fighter. But you will stoop to torture.
I would, yes.
Well, on that note, we need to take a break.
Yeah.
Where are your sisters?
I can't find them.
Anna? Joy?
Wait, I checked the entire house. They're not here.
Dad, there was this RV, and they were playing on it. We thought there was someone inside.
You wait here. Let me go.
I couldn't find them!
Detective Loki.
Do you have children, detective?
I'm gonna find your daughter.
Show me your hands right now!
You put those girls somewhere, Alex. No. I know you put those girls somewhere.
So I roped you in to watching easily one of my favorite movies, but easily one of the grittiest, darkest movies.
Yeah.
Not in a horror kind of way.
No.
In a gripping, disturbing, just dark kind of movie. What's the movie called?
Prisoners.
Yeah. And you haven't watched or heard really anything about it until last night. Until between last night and this morning when I finished it up. I mean, maybe I did, and it just didn't stick in my conscience. So you might have heard of a movie and just like, I'll probably never watch that movie. So, but no, up to this point, no. Mm-hmm. I always like to get a verdict. Sometimes, some people want to get a verdict at the end after discussing it. And some people want a verdict right up front. I'm an up front kind of guy.
Okay.
So here, before you give me your verdict, either thumbs up or thumbs down. People know. I mean, if it's obviously one of my top movies, I'm like enthusiastic thumbs up.
Okay.
Easily top 10 movie of all time for me. But let me read you a couple quotes here. All right, and you can tell me which one you sympathize with more.
Okay, absolutely.
All right, Christopher Orr of The Atlantic wrote, "Ethical exploration or exploitation? In the end, I come down reservedly on the former side. The work done here by Jackman, Gyllenhaal, and especially Villeneuve is simply too powerful to ignore." Okay, that's one. Or, writing in the New Republic, David Thompson declared that the film was weary after 10 minutes. And furthermore, hideous, cruel, degrading, depressing, relentless, prolonged, humorless, claustrophobic, and a mockery of any surviving tradition in which films are entertainment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, what the?
Wow.
All right.
Oh my
Which one do you resonate with?
My meter is probably closer to the former.
Okay.
I mean, I think the, what is that, the New Republics?
That was the Atlantic.
The Atlantic,
Christopher
sorry?
Orr, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, the second one. That
Oh,
you
the
read.
second was the New Republic. Yeah.
Okay, yes, that's what I was meaning. The New Republic's one was that is just unfair.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they watched the same movie that we did.
I agree.
I mean, it's just the movie. I understand if dark movies aren't your thing, or I could understand if maybe the genre doesn't resonate with you. But it would seem to me that was overly biased in a negative direction.
Yeah.
It
Almost feels like a great movie had just been produced and he didn't want to follow the bandwagon. That's what it feels like to
That's
me.
what it feels like. And so just lay my cards on the table. That's not the kind of movie I would jump to watch.
Yeah.
But I have to say that after I watched it, I'm the better for it, just because it was a good piece of art.
Yeah, it was.
It was a good piece of art.
I think that's a good term you use, because I would call it a great piece of art.
Yeah.
I mean, for myself, the acting was off the charts good. Jake Gyllenhaal, that guy,
Yeah.
he's so stinking good.
Yeah.
And Hugh Jackman, arguably, I think that was one of his best. I mean, I like him as Wolverine, whatever.
Logan,
but but this as a really angry, wrath-filled father,
Yeah.
he was nailing it. Now, some people, that was almost a complaint for some people, is that he was just gnashing his teeth all the time in anger. Well, if you had your little girl taken,
I mean, I don't know if, I've personally never, and I don't wish to ever, be around somebody who has had their little girl taken, but I would suspect that they would be somewhere pretty close to what he was acting.
Yeah.
I mean, just naturally, even more so. It would be painful to be around and watch.
Yeah.
So I agree with that.
Yeah, the director, he's a guy. I had to look this up to see how to pronounce his name, but it looks like Dennis, but it's actually Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve. And this was his first English film, which was really a smashing success. It was nominated at the 86th Academy Awards for Best Cinematography.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, the editing, the cinematography, the writing, the symbolism, off the charts good in my opinion. He also directed, you want to talk about a genuinely disturbing movie, but it was really well done. It's called Incendies. He did that.
Oh.
He also did Sicario and Arrival.
Arrival, I've heard a lot of good things about.
This guy is on fire.
Yeah.
I mean, Denis is on fire.
Yeah.
So he can make some movies. So anyway. So I feel like there's two levels that we can approach this movie.
Okay.
There's two levels. The one is I do want to think about the symbolism and even the very idea of the title Prisoners, because naturally a person wants to think of Alex and the two girls as prisoners, but there's a deeper meaning here. There's a whole other level of people being prisoners to different ideas.
Yeah.
This is the symbolism, and the other is just the more existential. What would you do? I want to know genuinely what you would do if you were Keller, seeing the things you did. So let's start with the latter, the existential level. So paint for me the beginning of the movie. Like how does it kind of begin to unfold? I mean, well, let me just say this.
Okay.
We're going to obviously spoil the snot out of this.
Yeah.
And this is not the kind of movie that you can get on VidAngel and really help you much.
No.
It's just the essence of the movie. So it's not like somebody can go, I just want to cut this one dark scene. No. If you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
It's just a dark movie.
Yeah. Okay, so the best way to start it is, obviously the movie starts kind of like with this father who you get the sense that he's very religious from the beginning.
Yeah, because it opens with the Lord's Prayer, right?
Yeah, it opens with the Lord's Prayer.
Hunting with his son.
Hunting with his son. And then it switches with this family friend. they went over by their house, and their daughters are playing, and
Was it like Thanksgiving or something?
it was Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
It was just, and maybe that added to the dark, dreary sort of overtone of the movie.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of it's Thanksgiving, it's cold, it's
Right.
rainy,
Yeah.
and then so the setting of the movie, and then the movie quickly sort of gets into it. I was surprised. I mean, it's a pretty long movie, but it gets into,
I mean, it took like 10
if all of that,
minutes
yeah,
to
I didn't
really
feel,
get to the
yeah. They really kind of jumped into the movie. Why don't you? So the movie kind of starts with this all-American family kind of getting together.
Yeah.
They have venison. They're feasting. It's a funny time. You know, the other the other parent is playing sort of trumpet, and they're all laughing, and the daughters
Terrence.
Terrence,
is
yeah.
his name.
And the daughters are playing together, and then they're pestering their parents about going outside.
We want to go over to our house real quick. Can we go over there?
And that's pretty much. And then after that, it happens.
Yeah. Well, so a significant detail is all the kids are the older brother, the older daughter, and then these two younger children are out walking on the street, and they come across this RV.
Yeah.
This dilapidated looking,
Grungy,
sketchy
disgusting,
looking RV. And there's obviously somebody in there. So then when the children, the two younger daughters, want to go back out, the parents are like, yeah, okay, all right, but take your older brother. Well, there was a miscommunication, and he didn't go with them.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, they're not coming back.
No.
And time's going by, and you feel very quickly that parental desperation.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they're out in the streets yelling for him. They go over to the house, and the movie does a really good job of ramping up that tension immediately of what it would feel like to wait. Where are the kids at?
Yeah.
Way too much time's gone by.
Yeah.
So the kids are gone, and the RV's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Now let me say this. A lot of parents that I know have had that moment where
I think we all have.
Okay, so describe your moment. Describe your moment.
Well, I mean, anytime you're at an amusement park or anywhere
Yeah.
busy, and if
Yeah.
your kid just gets away from you for even a minute to where you're spinning around looking, I don't even know how to describe that feeling. It's a mixture of panic, dread, and helplessness.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it, but it's such a potent variety. It's not like normal, like, oh, I'm dreading going to the dentist.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Far. It's happened to me twice.
Oh, really?
The first time, Maddie was a little girl. We were over by our pastor in Mississippi's house. I was in seminary then, and both me and my wife do a good job of watching our children. But for some reason, we just took our eyes off of her, and she just disappeared.
Yeah.
And everyone was looking. Immediately, I was like, "Hey, where's Maddie?" And she was too young to
Like
even.
how old was she?
Maybe 2,
Okay,
2.5.
so very young.
Yeah, 2.5, maybe 3.
Not even old enough to really
No.
communicate to somebody.
No. And we looked around and we didn't see her.
Oh, no.
And I remember in that moment, when people say their heart dropped, I think what they mean is, when you're happy, your heart is really full. It feels like you stick your chest up more. You're just laughing, but in that moment, everything drops. You almost become paralyzed. And I remember my wife just looking at me like, what? And she just went in full panic mode. And I think I had to stop her from calling the police right there and then, because I was just like, no.
Yeah, you're right.
I said, this just happened.
Right.
So I ran, I started running around and looking. Maybe she had gone into the woods, and so I just made a dart for the woods. And then after about 5 minutes, somebody yelled out, "Oh, she ran to the front."
Oh, man.
And she was in the front, swinging. But she's by herself.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. And then the very last one happened just recently during Halloween.
Oh, really?
When Virginia this time went off. And then she ended up just she ended up going into the car of one of our elders to talk to them, but we didn't know. And they didn't know we were looking for her. They thought that we knew that they were in there, and she was missing for about 15 minutes.
Yeah, ooh, that's a long time.
And let me just tell you,
That's a long time.
I was so... yeah, you're right. Scared isn't even the word.
I can't...
Yeah.
Your heart dropping is a good... Oh, yeah. I don't know. Terror.
Terror.
Yeah. It's... Yeah.
And when she came back...
Preternatural concern.
Sorry. yeah. And when she came back, you know what I did?
What'd you do?
I couldn't even hug her.
Really?
I just went for a walk.
Huh.
I was just like...
Because you were so torn up.
Yeah, I was just like... Because she wanted... She was like, oh, Daddy, I'm fine. I was like, no.
You don't know what you did to me.
I was like, let me just go for a walk.
Well, sadly, in this movie, they don't come back, do they? I mean, they're gone.
They're gone.
And so they quickly call the police, and the police quickly locate the RV.
Yeah.
Describe to me the dude
Oh, my goodness.
in the RV. Now, if there was ever a poster child for a pervert,
Yeah. I just went to say the same thing.
yeah, I mean, the guy, whoever that was, nailed it.
They
Creeposaurus.
Yeah. Yeah, this guy, he was like, if you ever actually see the real Ted Bundy, have you ever seen the real Ted Bundy?
Yeah. He's real charismatic, yeah.
Yeah. He looked like that sort of dark, simple, sort of clean-shaved, very steely-eyed, very, I don't know. It was the weirdest, creepiest, fake, creepy guy I've ever seen.
Yeah. Those glasses, big,
Perfect.
thick.
Yeah.
Yeah, not cool. What I want to get to with you is obviously the question that eats at me is you had the RV outside your house. Well, let's say it's you.
Yeah.
The RV was outside your house. They found the guy who drove the same RV when your children disappeared.
Yeah.
When he's released from the police station,
Yeah.
and you tackle him because you're upset, and he says to you, they didn't cry until I left. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so he says that to you. Then you go and watch him at night at his house. You see him do an act of cruelty, holding up the dog in the air by the leash. And then he starts singing the song, the little Christmas ditty that your daughter was singing when she went out. Now, he abducts him by gunpoint. My question to you, what would you do? At that moment, knowing what you know, what would you do? I mean, honestly, what do you think you would do? Because I wrestle with that.
Yeah.
What I actually do.
Okay, so here's why this question is so tough. Because obviously, I don't know if I would have done what Hugh Jackman did.
Would you have gone there with a gun?
I would have gone there with a gun.
Okay. Would you have staked out the place as like he did?
I don't know. Let's just say yes.
You think you would?
And let's just say yes.
You'd
If I
wanna
was desperate enough, yes, absolutely, yes.
And if you heard him singing that song, what would you do? Tell me, Pastor Dennis.
Oh my goodness.
What would you do?
I would definitely approach him.
Yeah.
And okay, so here's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
Kidnapping is against the law.
Kidnapping is against the law.
You cannot
Kidnapping is a sin.
It's a sin. It's a sin.
There's no trolley problem there.
But yeah, well, okay, why don't you set up the trolley car problem? Because I believe there's a legitimate one here before I answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So the issue is, as a father who is the protector of the, you're the protector, you are 99.999% sure that this guy knows something. I mean, he has to.
Yeah.
He has to know something.
Yeah.
The police can't really do anything to him yet. There's a ticking time bomb, as it were. Namely, the more time that goes by that your daughter's gone, it's more likely that she is going to die. So you're facing a ticking time bomb. You're almost certain this guy knows something.
Yeah.
And you need to get that information out of him.
Right.
But at the same token, you can't... I mean, on the other hand, kidnapping him or torturing him is sinful.
Yeah.
But is it all? But can you do nothing? Is that the trolley problem?
Yeah, that's in essence the trolley problem. You know, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I'm asking you legitimately. I want to know what
I would do.
Because I asked you, would you ever threaten to smash somebody's hand with a hammer in an abandoned building?
Okay. Without hopefully all of this being very highly hypothetical, I would initially plead for my daughter's life.
So you would talk to him?
I would talk to him.
Yeah.
And I said, if you've done this, please, just you could turn it back now. Don't make it any worse. I would definitely plead for my daughter's life to start with.
Yeah. It's a good starting point. But I think we're all curious what plan B is.
Yeah, so plan A is to go through legitimate lawful means.
Okay.
To plead for my daughter's life.
Yeah.
Plan B would be, can't believe I'm saying this, but this is true. Plan B would probably be something along the lines of, yes, threatening him with physical violence.
Yeah, getting in his grill.
Yeah. Like threatening him with physical violence. But I don't know. I guess I would be a little bit more high tech. Like, look, see if I could make my own sort of truth serum. You know, put him in a mental state where his normal defenses...
it's called a stun gun. It's called a hammer, Dennis. It's called a hammer. You're like getting out your old lab kit from 5th grade.
From 5th grade.
Let's see what we can make here.
You know, I was pretty good in chemistry when I was in high school. Well, let's turn this on you. What would you do?
Well, you know, I think all right. So there are obviously two levels to this, and yes, and that's what every father watching this is supposed to feel. It's supposed to elicit this kind of primal response.
Right.
Like, oh, you have my child, I'm a bear, I destroy you, right?
Yeah.
It's real simple. So, on the one hand, my flesh, no doubt, wants to do pretty much exactly what Kelly Dover did.
Yeah.
What Hugh Jackman did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to get the truth out of you. I'm going to go Keith or Sutherland on you and torture your butt. You know, that's true. But I really think in a more sober moment, I'd watch him. I probably would talk to him. And I probably would... I think I'd be willing to maybe get into his house and look things over. Or some the property.
I would definitely make his life very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like I would write newspapers. I mean, you know, so plan A would be pleading for my daughter's life. Maybe I might say plan B would be make his life, like put him underneath a microscope. Like write every newspaper in our town, national newspaper. Any little infraction I see him break, I would call the police. Yeah. Like I would troll him so bad that it would be almost impossible for him to do anything. Mm-hmm. Like I would just, his life would be unlivable and I would do everything that an annoying neighbor would do. Like I would buy a vehicle with huge speakers and just play loud music. Mm-hmm. Like I would just constantly create stirs everywhere he goes. I'd purposely follow him or have people follow him. Yeah. Like his life would be unlivable. Yeah. Essentially. Yeah.
There's so many directions we could go. So let me just voice some of them that are in my head.
Right.
As a Christian, are we compelled to follow the law of the land in situations like this and let the police do their duty? I want to say yes, right? That's a good law-abiding citizen should do that. But I can imagine scenarios where you're on the frontier or in some third world country where society is breaking down and there aren't police officers. do the ethics change when you can't appeal to an authority? Do you go vigilante mode, and is it justified?
Well, let's back up for a second. This gets tricky. There's an assumption. Yeah. First of all, I wouldn't grant that in every situation, you leave everything up to police officers. I would not say for a Christian that in every situation we should leave it up to police officers. For instance,
Give me an example.
let me give you a for instance. If someone is breaking into my home and is in the process of attacking my family, I think that there's good biblical warrant, based on, remember when David went off to battle and then his family was kidnapped and he went out and went after them and go get them. There's other sort of examples of the Bible when people are being attacked and they defend themselves.
Sure. Well, and the disciples had swords.
The disciples had swords.
Presumably on those robber-ridden roads to at least feign its usage.
Yeah. Well, one could assume. So I would say that there are times in a situation where my family is being actively attacked that I have a moral duty to defend my family in that moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because,
Well, I shouldn't say for sure, because somebody like John Piper would actually disagree here.
Yeah, I've heard of Piper saying that that he wouldn't do anything, or he would plead or something like that.
Yeah, he wouldn't kill a person because he feels like to send that kind of that person to hell at that moment, he would rather lay his life down, and even those he loves as like sheep to be slaughtered. That's
really
kind of the thinking. I hope I'm being fair to his position, but that's me summarizing it.
Yeah, I don't see personally. I don't see enough biblical warrant for that. Piper would also say, well, I would defend my family from theological error. Right? Mm-hmm. I'd defend my family against...
You wouldn't kill the professor that was teaching
I wouldn't. I wouldn't kill the professor, but that's a good point. But I would I would neutralize someone if they came to attack my family.
Sure.
So I would say in instances like that where if somebody robs my home or something like that, that's a different story. But if somebody is going to take our life,
and I think most Christians are going to say amen, right?
Yeah.
Already amen. But the more pointed one is, what about vigilantism? This, if you feel very confident that someone has your child and you can't appeal to the police, do you go Kelly Dover on them or Keller Dover on them?
Well, I would say this. The Bible tells me pretty clearly that if I, as a husband, do not provide for my child, I'm worse than an infidel. Right? If I don't provide resources for my child. A part of providing resources for my child is providing safety and protection for my children. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I could extrapolate from that principle of providing for my child, that if somebody is preventing me from providing for my child...
Especially with such violent intent.
Yeah, absolutely. Then I would. I absolutely would. There's no question. For me, that's not even a question. Now, again, would I do it in such a brutal, hyper-violent, sadistic sort of way?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Would I use all means before me that are lawful? It depends. The funny thing about law is that there's not a law that says thou shalt not thou shalt not play loud music in front. I don't know if there's a law against annoying your neighbors, but
and that's the thing. That's the struggle. That's the conundrum, right? As we were talking about in a previous episode, is the idea of trolley problems is this conundrum created situation because of sin.
Yeah.
Obviously, pounding somebody into the ground that's not ideal.
No.
But sometimes it's necessary in the face of violence. I mean, if they have murderous intent, somebody's breaking into your home, or whatever, you have to resort to violence to stop it, or in order to retrieve your children from these people. Yeah, I can imagine in the Wild West getting on my horse with my rifle.
Oh yeah,
and let's say Indians or somebody marauded the village and took the children. Yeah, I'm going after them with my rifle. Yeah, and they better hand her over. Yeah, or we're going to be shooting. Or
we're going to rootin' tootin' shooting.
So what's the difference? My intuitions, rooted in biblical logic, tell me that would be okay. So where's the misstep then with Mr. Dover?
Well,
because he gets the guy. Yeah. He pulls in his friend.
And that's who we haven't talked about, because there's two sides to the story.
Yeah, this was another point I was going to make. What if you were the friend?
What if I was the friend?
What if you were brought in and saw this?
Well, if I was the friend, I probably would have slapped him and said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Two hands are an extra pair of hands is better than just here. We while I sleep, maybe you could be trying to work this guy.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let's take a step back for a second. Yes, there's another sort of person of interest here, and his daughter's just as taken. His daughter's just as in danger, but he has a sort of a slightly different feeling about this.
He does. He approaches it differently.
Yeah, talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, Mr. Dover brings him there, and he tells him to bring an extra a change of clothes. Yeah. So he goes into this abandoned building, takes him up to this dilapidated bathroom, and there, with tape over his mouth and hands bound, is Alex, the man that they presume knows something about where their daughters are at. And Terrence is aghast. Yeah. Oh, man, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? And obviously, Keller gets in his face. Listen, our daughters could be about to die. Yeah. We have to do something here. And so they resort to torture. Yeah.
Now, here's something interesting, and maybe this might temper how we look at the situation. Okay. Remember when they're sort of in the midst of torturing him, and the other guy is just having these second thoughts, and he said he's not a person anymore. He stopped being a person the moment he took our daughter.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. That's a key thing.
That's a key thing. So why is that key in your opinion? Why do you think that's key in your opinion?
There's an irony we almost have to need to back up at this point and talk about the larger symbolism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's an irony here. And that is, you come to find out later in the movie that this Alex fellow was abducted himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his mind has been completely crushed under the weight of this torturous existence. Yeah. And this trying to get out of this maze that has no way of getting out of the maze. And so the irony is you've kidnapped this. You're doing the same thing that your opponents are doing. You've kidnapped a guy, and you're horribly mistreating him and treating him not like a real person. Exactly what the horrible family would do.
And for this guy, this is the second time in his life that's happened to him. Yeah, which was gut wrenching at the end when you find that out, but. I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it from a different angle, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about this. So when I was in seminary, I had a professor that had this theory, and Dr. Vargas would say that he would sort of say the reason why people are so evil and mean and awful and treat each other like they're just not satisfied with killing people. They want to kill them in the most gross way ever. It's because people see God in each other. They might not acknowledge it or recognize it by God, but they do. And because they do, they want to kill each other really, really poorly. And I always felt like, okay, that's an interesting theory that makes sense because people want to destroy God, but they can't, so they destroy that which is in its image. But there's always something that sort of in the back of my mind pushed back against that principle, because I'm like, I think the reason why people are so, treat each other so evil and mean is because they don't actually see each other as people. That there has to be a form of not human attached to people before we can really, treat people bad or to kill anybody. You have to stop seeing them as a person, because you can't kill that which you legitimately believe is like you.
Okay, to the first one.
Yeah.
Without spending much time reflecting on it, I just want to say that it strikes me as just trying to see too much theology in this, in the whole idea of seeing God in other people.
It might be a throwaway line by him. I want to be
theologizing.
Fair. Yeah,
that's the word I'm trying to. It just seems like it's theologizing, overly theologizing.
Okay,
that's how it strikes me.
All right.
As for the other, so you're saying people can brutalize to a greater degree if they can dehumanize someone.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what the Nazis did to the Jews. They didn't.
That's true.
Necessarily see them as, this sort of perfect human race. They saw them as dogs, as ghetto rats, and so they were able to.
Except I don't know that you. I mean, surely you wouldn't. How far would you take that though? Because I think people are perfectly willing and capable to destroy another person because they're just another person. I mean, it's just in the human heart to be cruel, to be brutal, to be barbaric. I've certainly felt with bullies in my own heart in middle school. I would have no need to reduce them to like a rabbit or something to want to punch him in the face.
But okay, so how do you interpret his statement? Like, how do you... Obviously, we believe in all of this symbolism. We haven't even dealt with some of the more overt ones, but how do you wrestle with that statement? He stopped being a person when he took our daughter. When he took our daughters. So that's obviously a statement where he's not looking at this person as if he is like them. At the very least, he's looking at this person as being subhuman. This person isn't fully human, because if they were fully human, they wouldn't have done this to two little girls.
Yeah, and I just see it as a rationalization, as a justification. Here he is. He's willing. The ends justify the means.
Yeah.
I think he's merely trying to assuage his conscience, because there are times. Remember, there was one point where it's when he has him, I think, in that shower, that torture shower contraption where you can do the hot or the cold water, and he, if I remember right, he slumps down and he's just, why won't you tell me? And then he starts to pray the Lord's Prayer, and he's like, Father, forgive me. But it's interesting that he stops. He doesn't say, as I forgive my transgressors.
Yeah. Yeah,
he doesn't say that.
No, he doesn't. That's a good point. Yeah.
He doesn't keep going.
Yeah.
So he's not willing. It's like he catches himself up short, and he's not willing to go further. So if you can dehumanize the guy, then you don't have to, ask for for him to forgive.
Or, I mean, I don't know. I definitely think at some point, but I just find it it's an interesting concept, because, when you hear certain movements within different societies that are being mistreated, that's one of the things that they say. I mean, in our country, blacks said they weren't treated like human beings, or they were, they were. There's this sort of discussion about blacks being given, a portion, being counted as a portion of a full human being.
Sure.
Or it's well documented that in Australia, Aborigines weren't seen as fully human, and on and on and on. So there's this built-in mechanism in society where oppressed people especially feel like they're dehumanized or given subhuman status.
But don't you think that's just because we do know that, let's say, a black man in the 40s is a human being? That's the reason why they would call them a dog or something, because they know it hurts. Because I wouldn't call a dog a chicken. It wouldn't occur to me to be like, you
dumb chicken.
You dumb chicken.
You dumb
because
dog.
I know it's like, you're just a dog. You are just a dog.
That's a very good and very fair point. The only thing I would say in response to that is, but the very act of doing it is trying to convey a subhuman status.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
why?
it is.
You know, yeah. So I mean, I'm just trying to wrestle with this whole aspect of, if I'm forced to give the same amount of grace and love to a murderous fiend who has my daughter, in my mind, I can't do what I feel like. I can't go as far as I would like to go in order to extract a confession or extract information that would lead me to her.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, you know, like, I guess here's my point I want to make.
Okay.
We're all created in the image of God. And if you are mindful of that, then how you treat somebody else is going to impact and change depending on that one premise. So if you somehow convince yourself that that person's image has been so marred by their wickedness and evil, then you are under no obligation to treat that person with any type of, you know, the same sort of reverence or the same sort of respect as you would somebody who you feel hasn't compromised their image.
Yeah. And I can't. I mean, who among us could deny that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's undeniable, and I do think that was a brilliant whoever came up with that line. It was a very, very apropos and intelligent line.
But you still haven't told me what you feel like. How, I mean, maybe you have to some degree.
Say it again. No.
How do you feel that line is functioning in his mind, and do you see a connection between that and how he's the level of brutality?
Yeah, and I would say by dehumanizing his captive in that manner, Keller stooped to the same level as the child abductors.
Okay,
he became one of them.
Yeah.
I think there was an ironic. It was an ironic, an irony there. It's like you are becoming the enemy.
Yeah.
Because the thing that needs, if people who are listening to this, at some point a Christian is going to go, what about love your enemies? You know, at some point, you know, you guys are pretty comfortable talking about riding off on your horses, killing the Indians, and you know, and roughing this guy up. So what about loving your enemies?
Well, why don't you smack that down for us? Why don't you talk about how the two aren't necessarily incongruous?
Well, I think that kind of harkens back to the whole idea of the trolley things. There are situations. I mean, different you don't want to have situational ethics entirely, but you can't get away from different circumstances do require different responses.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I would say, yes, if somebody's breaking into my home, they are my enemy. And you better believe they're going to meet Mr. Smith and Wesson. Yeah. You know, that's the way it is. Now, that's kind of that's the counter argument of the pacifist, though, is that, no. I am always going to turn the cheek, and I am never going to resort to violence. I'm not going to do it. And there is a debate to be had there. Yeah. You can't get away from these conundrums, because love thy enemy and also love thy neighbor. My family is my neighbor. Yeah. And that's the idea behind just war theory is, am I just going to sit idly by while genocide occurs? Exactly. Right? I'm not loving my neighbor.
And you're not loving your neighbor. And sometimes the most loving thing that you can do for your enemy is do things like tell them the truth. Restrain their evil so they're not storing up more evil for the day of wrath. Yeah. The most loving thing you can do for your enemy is prevent them from killing other people. There's this notion that to love your enemy means that, you know, that you shouldn't do anything to bring your enemy harm. Like, that's what it means to love your enemy. When, you know, from a biblical perspective, to love your enemy simply means to afford your enemy the same amount of grace that the Lord affords you, right? Now, there's nowhere in Scripture where the Lord loves us so much that he doesn't punish us. In fact, the Bible says, for whom the Lord loves, he chastens. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. If my enemy, in the midst of being chastened, does not want to repent, right, then he is storing up to himself wrath. So there's this notion that loving your enemy means that, oh, well, I should just let my enemy continue in their murderous sort of spree. No, that's not what the Bible says. That's not what the Bible calls us to at all. And okay, so you mentioned turning the other cheek. Should in this situation, does turning the other cheek mean?
Alex, let me give you my other.
Yeah,
kid.
yeah. I have another son.
Yeah.
So why don't you take my other son and do whatever you did to my daughter?
Yeah.
Of course not.
No,
like
of
that's.
course not.
I mean, we would never.
Right. That's absurd.
That's absolutely absurd. So I think you hit the nail on the head. As Christians, we don't believe in situational ethics to the standpoint that our morality changes with the situation, but we would say the application of a moral principle changes because the situation has changed.
I think one of the reasons why I'm so intrigued by these kind of trolley problem ideas is because if you imagine that the fall never occurred, we would spend eternity plumbing the depths of reality and God's character.
Yeah.
Trying to figure, what is goodness, what is righteousness. Now, in God's wisdom, he ordained a fall whereby heaven and hell come into conflict. They touch each other right here on the plane of our existence. And when those two touch, it is precisely there where the matrix of confusion exists. And the endeavor that we were going to do for eternity, exploring God's character as perfectly good, is now we're exploring it with a lot of confusion. Hence these kinds of things. Wait, how in the world do I love my enemy? That very phrase wouldn't have made sense in an unfallen world. Love your enemy.
Yeah,
that's a paradox.
Yeah.
Wait, love your enemy? It's my enemy. But God in his wisdom has put us here to exercise wisdom and to try to wrestle with these things. Like, I have to love my family. I need to love my neighbor. I need to love my enemies. How does all that work? And God says, that's right. Wrestle.
Yeah.
Wrestle. Be like me. And all these things. Have the mind of Christ. And so that is where I struggle, because when I get to the end of that statement and say, have the mind of Christ, I do have a hard time imagining Christ getting on a horse and going after the Indian with a rifle. But at the same token, he also smashed a serpent's head.
Yeah.
And humiliated him on the cross.
Yeah.
And he also is the same one who will throw people in hell. And who was the angel that destroyed many people.
And the same one who very deliberately and carefully plaited pieces of, whether it was leather or hard cloth together and cleared them out of a temple.
Yeah, you're right.
So I mean, and the same one who very poignantly chided the religious elites of his day for leading his people into hell. So there's a sense in which you're right. These trolley car problems, they only exist because of the fall, right? I mean, prior to the fall, loving your neighbor would be nonsensical.
Our ethical explorations would have functioned differently.
Yeah, completely differently. But the irony of it, though, is that after the fall, it becomes even more of an exercise of confusion, because number one, we don't possess the inward ability to love our enemies or the desire necessarily, and number two, even though we love our enemy, it's wholly imperfect. I mean, Vern Poitras has this line in his sort of discussion about trolley problems, and he said, anytime one makes an ethical decision in a trolley problem, we assume that the decision that we make is the right one. So let's just say, you maintain I'm going to lie to the Nazi. Who's to say that they're going to believe that lie?
Right.
And who's to say they're just not going to barge in anyway because they, the reason why they're there is because they know you possibly are hiding people. Otherwise, why would they come?
Right.
So even if you lie, who's to say they're not going to barge in? They're not going to find the people, kill them, and kill you. And then now you got to,
Right.
now you compounded the problem by lying.
Yeah. Sure.
So I don't know. I getting back to sort of the movie, what left when I walked, and we haven't even talked about the ending.
Yeah, what do you think?
How wild is that?
Well, you talking about the end?
The end, like
Yeah.
the absolute ending.
Okay. He's in the pit.
He's in
with
the
the
pit.
whistle. Yeah. And Loki is standing out there.
Yeah,
and he
and
barely hears
He
it.
it's faintly heard, and it's just, that's it.
Yeah. Well, see, I take it as extremely optimistic. In other words, he hears it. He's
Yeah.
like, wait, what's that? And he
Yeah.
turns his head and the movie ends.
Yeah.
He's going to find him.
But what do you think is the symbolism of why they didn't end with him being found?
I just think it was a great way to end a movie, to let your mind imagine it, because
Yeah.
that's what gnaws at you. Is you desperately want him to find him, like move the car, look at the pit, right? So that's a brilliant thing. But I do think maybe we should segue quickly then to some of the symbolism, because I do think this director infused this movie with a lot of subtlety and really kind of spiritual pictures. Where to start with this? Obviously, the idea of the maze features very prominently.
Yeah.
And the very title of the movie, Prisoners, features very prominently. Obviously, one of the things that stands out to me is obviously we're to look at the two little girls and Alex as being prisoners. That's obvious. That's level 1. Level 2 is here you have somebody like Keller Dover, obviously a religious man.
Yeah.
He has a fish on the back of his truck.
Yeah.
He's got a cross swinging from his rearview mirror.
Yeah.
He's a carpenter.
Yeah.
His mother's name in the newspaper is Mary.
Mary, yeah.
His wife's name is Grace.
Yeah.
I mean, those aren't accidental. And he has in his basement a stockpile of food and weapons. He's to be prepared for anything.
There you go.
But here he was, not prepared. He couldn't prepare for something like this. And when thrust into this temptation, I think the struggle of the movie is to ask, well, did he do what was right or didn't he? Was he prepared spiritually for these kinds of things or wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it leaves me saying, nah, man, you crossed, I mean, you really, really tortured a guy. Yeah. And he really, ironically, he didn't really know much. I mean, he kind of did, but he was another victim himself.
Yeah.
You were torturing the wrong guy.
You were torturing. And that's, I mean, yeah, to me, that's what makes the movie so painful is, and you don't get this until like the very end. Yeah. Like is that number one, he didn't really get over his father's death.
No, clearly. Well, and why do you say that?
Well, he's a master carpenter. Yeah. And he's saying it's going to take a lot to get his father's like seriously,
dilapidated building. Yeah. He leaves it untouched.
He leaves it untouched. I mean, there's nothing. I get the sense from the movie that he could have gone in there and knocked that out piecemeal.
Yeah,
I mean easily.
But his maze, as it were, was this conflicted existence of why did my father killed himself?
Yeah.
And he didn't look out for me. So I'll tell you what, when somebody steps in my life and takes my kid, I'm going vigilante mode.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the opposite extreme, which is true a little bit for all of us. And let me give you an example. When I was growing up, and my dad died when I was young, things for my family got really tight. And I remember there were nights when, unfortunately, we had to go to bed hungry. Like, I mean, that's just life. It was very hard. My mother did her best.
Because you're so poor.
Yeah, because essentially we were so poor. And my mother, she was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so she had to really try to figure out ways to kind of not allow that to happen. There were some nights there wasn't enough.
Was there government aid, really?
Well, I grew up in the Bahamas. Yeah. No, not really.
Not really.
No.
So it was...
Yeah, it's not like the U.S., But, and so now, like... My wife, who didn't grow up in that, like she grew up in a house of plenty. Her father, took care of them and provided for them well. As a punishment, like sometimes she would say things like, "Well, if you don't do this, I'll send you to bed with no supper. And for me, that's anathema.
That's a trigger, right.
No, like we're not. I don't care what they do.
Right.
No, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
We're going to find another form of discipline, but that's not going to be one of them.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I sort of looked at that situation where I was like, I get it. Like I mean, his friend's reaction wasn't as visceral and as urgent and as, the man whose daughter got taken.
Yeah, Terrence, I'm
sorry. Yeah. Terrence, he didn't have that, but,
yeah.
Hugh Jackman had it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's because he lost his dad.
Clearly that played a significant role.
So the overcompensation aspect, I was like, I totally get that, because there are things that happen in my life where, because they happen, I tend to take the opposite extreme of what that is. And like you said, all of us do that. Like I'm sure you could think of something where it happened when you were young, and then now the pendulum has swung the other way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, my aunt died of cancer in our home. My mom took care of her, and that had a profound effect on me. A profound effect on me. So yeah, these you can't get away from these things, and clearly this movie captures that. You think of Alex, obviously, when he was abducted as a small child, he lost his mind. The maze for him was being lost in the maze of this craziness. It was like he was a 10-year-old, I think they said. He just IQ of a 10-year-old or something. But he seemed way worse than even that, like a backward 10-year-old. You think of that other guy, that Bobby guy who was abducted and got away, who had all the snakes and stuff. He couldn't help but still, he couldn't help but be lost in this depraved setting that he grew up in. It tortured his mind. You think of the woman who was abducting the children. She lost a kid to cancer. And because of that, she said, I'm going to wage war against God. I'm going to make people lose their faith. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah. And her husband, who was this total pervert murderer, the priest is hearing him confess. Kind of the maze that he's in, this ethical dilemma that he has is, what do I do with this guy? And what's he do? He ties him up in his basement in his home and leaves him to die. So all of these people are prisoners. Well, and even Loki.
Yeah.
Here he is. He's a guy who's got a masonite ring on. He's got a cross tattooed here. He has some kind of that star of Ishtar or whatever on his neck. He grew up in children's home. Yeah. Clearly, he's a man who now wants to save children, but he kind of does so in this. He's a cool cucumber, though. Yeah. The way he does stuff. That he seems like a brooding, dark guy, still doing good though. Yeah. So I think that there's just levels of symbolism here. Yeah. Where everybody is prisoners to different things. Yeah. And one of the most significant moments of the movie is when Hugh Jackman is thrust into that dark pit under the car. Mm-hmm. He finds that whistle. And you remember what he does after he finds the whistle?
Did he start praying?
He prayed.
Yeah.
Like, Lord. I can't remember exactly what he said, but Almighty God, please protect my girl.
Daughter. Yeah.
It's like all of his efforts didn't do squat for his little girl. Ironically, it was all the cop.
Yeah.
That's kind of, if you were to read the moral of the movie, the moral of the movie is, man, you just did a lot. You're going to go to jail. Yeah. You tortured this guy. Yeah. And it honestly didn't do anything for you, man. Yeah. It didn't work out for you.
Yeah, because the guy didn't even kidnap the kids.
No.
It's the woman that did it.
Yeah.
That is so...
It's messed up.
That's messed up. And I kind of a little bit saw that coming.
Really? You did?
Well, I didn't... first of all, I did not see that the woman took them.
Yeah, okay.
But
that was a good catch if you got that.
No, I did not. But I did know that guy didn't do it.
Okay, so you felt confident that Alex was pretty innocent.
But I thought, so when they introduced the character of the psycho who was buying, like, women's clothing, kids' clothing and all that, I felt like somehow they knew one another. Yeah. Like, that's where he was going, when she said, what was she supposed to be, his aunt?
I took it as, quote unquote, and like he was another abducted kid who probably got away. I don't know, or just abducted
she was pretending to be his aunt.
Yeah,
maybe?
I don't know.
Okay,
I'm not real clear on that. Maybe I get the feeling that either he was abducted and raised that way, or just maybe biology. I don't know.
I
I'm
think he was
confused.
abducted, and then she
Yeah.
gave him that cocktail,
Yeah.
and his mind that just jacked up his mind.
Right. Clearly, it was all about mind control and screwing these
Yeah.
poor kids up.
Oh my goodness, that was awful. All right, man. Well,
So you feel good? You feel nice and uplifted after that? You ready to tackle life?
I need to go and pray.
cleanse yourself.
Yeah, I
after
need to
that
cleanse myself after
Unclean
that.
movie.
I will say the probably the biggest takeaway from me though is that it's forcing me to think about, okay, right now we're in a situation where, to our knowledge, our families are safe and healthy and doing good. And right now our faith is in a good place. We love the Lord. We read the Word. We pray. What would it take to shake our faith to the point where we become our own prisoners?
Yeah.
Where we would abandon the faith that we hold so dear to either do something that's morally ambiguous or descend into the moral abyss where we're drinking and becoming a vigilante and all of these things.
Yeah, I'll answer honestly because you'll. The more you get to know me, the more you will realize that I am actually extremely morbid. I think about death a lot. I think about all these kind of things a lot. They just really, for whatever reason, my makeup and just the way I am, these issues weigh heavily. So I can tell you what it would take. And this would probably be a good conversation for a future day. We could maybe watch the movie Silence and talk about it. But what could do it would be severe loss followed by what I perceive to be the silence of God. That's the hard one.
Yeah.
That's really, really hard when you seem like you are choking to death on life. And you say, why won't God just give me a hug? That could do it. Something like Prisoners could do it.
Yeah.
Something with my children like that, that would definitely push my button.
Yeah.
That would for sure push my button. The other thing that will do it is when the church doesn't function like it's supposed to. When there's really crappy pastors who don't preach the word like they should, who commit adultery and do all these kinds of things. When the body is divisive and fighting like cats and dogs and there's no love, there's no grace. Those things will make me sit there and go, what is this hokey thing? And I felt that at different points. So that's a heavy but honest answer.
Yeah, I know. I'm I don't know if you probably talk about this on a podcast, but I at various times I feel like I come to the edge. I mean, so
because you kind of talked about your personality is a little bit melancholic anyway.
yeah,
right?
I'm melancholy at my core, right? And I think in God's sovereignty, He gave me a wife that's just filled with levity. Like my wife, she just has the ability to make me laugh at any time. I personally think she's probably one of the funniest people I've ever met. She has a way, especially when I get dark, and she doesn't talk about it much, but when I do get in my dark places, she's just mastered what to say and how to say it to get me out of the funk.
Well, what triggers that for you usually?
When I feel as if the gospel isn't really the power of God.
Yeah, and that's kind of the third one I mentioned.
Yeah.
When things are breaking down.
Yeah.
And you go, where are you, Spirit?
Where, like, Lord, sometimes I feel like, okay, if your gospel is the power of God, then, and I know this person really needs the gospel, why aren't you breaking through? Like, why are they suffering? Or when you know that, like, there's a family that's just really hurting, or a situation where it's really bad, and you're just begging, or for me, I have a friend I've been close to now for 30 plus, like 30 odd years, and I have begged him to trust the Lord and
So he's
poured
not a
my
Christian.
heart out. He's not,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, Lord, in my mind, I'm thinking we still have plenty more time.
Yeah.
But if he were to die without you, that would hurt me.
Yeah.
Like that would not to say that I would jump off the cliff, but
Right.
that would really, really hurt.
Right. It would be a hot poker to the soul.
Oh yeah, by far.
Yeah, and what I'm about to say doesn't necessarily apply to that. I think there's a different way I think about that in my mind than necessarily this. But this passage occurred to me. I read it in a slightly different light. I mean, it's a famous passage, but I just heard it a little differently when I was talking about these issues of the silence of God. Like, why? And Keller Dover obviously was at that place. Like,
Yeah.
where are you? And Paul in Romans 8, it's really fascinating when he says, "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ?" Now, shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? I want to say, if those things are happening to me, yeah, where are you?
Yeah.
Where's your love?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm naked, being persecuted, starving with somebody about to kill me, I think the natural response at that moment is to go, God, don't you love me?
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yeah, absolutely.
But Paul uses that actually as the, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? No, not these things. No. For your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. Knowing all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. So you think, these are precisely, I want to say, God, these are precisely the things that make me think that you don't love me.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yeah.
And Paul's completely flipping it on its head. No. You're more than a conqueror through all these things. That's the way he works. You're a sheep to be led to the slaughter.
Yeah.
You're to be like Christ. You're to walk in his steps.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it any easier in my mind. But, some of these phrases we've been using, trying to figure out the logic of heaven, there's the logic of heaven.
Yeah.
And I don't, how to fully understand that is another thing, but it is the logic of heaven. And it makes me go, okay. You do love me even when I'm naked and hurting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and that's something I guess you kind of just have to hold on to. Because the answer to the question doesn't get better if you reject your faith. And that's what I have to remind myself. Like, if things are bad now and I'm holding on to you, Lord, I can't imagine how worse things are going to get once I don't.
Utterly hopeless.
Yeah, it's at that point you definitely plunge head deep into despair.
Yeah.
So that's good. All right.
Well, we can't wrap up quite yet.
Okay.
Because we have to explain our yes and no.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna. No. Let's transition out of this heavy.
Yeah. That was good though. I mean,
It was.
Yeah, just to kind
I
of
can't
talk
remember
through
what
it.
I asked you. Oh yeah, you don't have to
Yeah.
do mine. But what was the one you asked me?
I asked you. Hold on. I think I asked you something along the lines of.
Oh, that's right. Elections.
Yeah. Like, or do you still? Hold on. Let me find the question because I can't remember exactly. Okay. Do we genuinely believe in free and fair elections when we want only one side to win every time?
Yeah, and here's why I think it's an easy yes. Because what I want has no bearing on the fairness of an election. I mean, I make a choice one way or the other, and that doesn't. As long as the apparatus is set up fairly, in other words, lawful citizens can vote.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a fair system. You can come and throw your vote. Just because I want one side to win doesn't somehow diminish its overarching fairness, right?
Well, that's a good point. So you're saying that just because you want one side to win every time, or if you want one side to win every time.
Oh, so you have to say every time.
Well, then maybe I missed. Do we genuinely believe in free and fair elections when we want only one side to win every time?
Oh, every time.
Yeah.
So in other words, you're locked in.
Yeah, you're saying no matter what, I want this particular party to win. It doesn't matter what the other side's saying. Doesn't matter. I just want my party to win. And so the question then is, do you genuinely believe in something if it's free and fair? Because if something is open to where either side can win, and you just want one side to win, how is it possible for it to be, how is it possible for you to say that you genuinely believe in something that's free and fair?
But don't you have to parse? I almost hear that question as, I mean, you would grant that as long as it's a fairly set up democratic society where someone with an ID can come and vote, that's a fair election.
I would say two things make something fair. Okay. Yes, that aspect of it, the fact that people have the freedom to come and vote and whatever, that makes it fair, right?
So you're saying the fact that almost someone doesn't have free will, they're so locked into one party, they're so determined for that it's, if everybody is just a piece of a machine, then it undercuts the whole process? Is that what you're saying?
I think it does violence. And one of the things, I'm not just saying it just because of what happened this past election. Mm-hmm. I mean, which in itself is if people actually believed Trump was going to win, then why were people generally upset? The answer to that question is, the reason why they were so upset is because they thought he didn't have a chance to win. Then my thing is, then why bother having the election? Like if Hillary supporters truly believed that Trump was going to win, why the hysteria? And if they truly believed 100% that Hillary was going to win, then why bother us having the election?
But isn't that just, as it were, a level of rhetoric just going on? Because they talk that way because they do know at the end of the day, everybody's holding their breath. You're waiting to see.
Yeah,
and then they're totally freaked out. What? Yeah. There's that many hill jacks in the middle of the country?
No, well, I listen. Okay, let's take a step back. The reason why I asked this question is because I wanted to expose a flaw in our thinking, that the ideals that we hold, we don't actually hold them in good faith because we actually want one outcome. Like the whole reason why you and I sort of started this podcast is to tear people back to the middle. To say, listen, let's get our out of our extremes, whether they be theology, whether they be, our ethics, and let's get back to middle of the road, sane ways of talking about moral truth. Mm-hmm. This question came about as a way to expose the fact that, listen, when we talk about something as important as elections, and my goodness, we're getting into election season again, 2018 midterms. Can't believe it.
I know. That was fast.
We're going to hear all these people talking, and I'm just like, do they even care about democracy? Because at the end of the day, all they're saying is, pick my guy. They're not saying pick the best opinions, pick the best ideas. Here's why this idea has merits. It's almost like it doesn't matter what the other side say. I'm going to say it's the worst thing on the planet, even though some of it might actually be good, and maybe we can find a middle road to it. But let's just burn down the other house, and so our house is the one that people vote for.
So on the one hand, there's so much subterfuge that it makes the process seem flaky. But on the other hand, I want to say, as long as people aren't actually screwing with the system, the actual votes, somebody dumping 1 million fake votes in there, it's I would say, even if people are somewhat robots, I still am going to go, yes, it's fair and balanced, because they pulled a lever according to their own wills, even if the will was flaky.
Yeah.
Let me read you something.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Babylon Bee.
I love that site.
Poll. Majority of evangelicals would support Satan if he ran as a Republican candidate. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't.
It's
That's
awesome.
So funny.
It's awesome. Let me just... Opening line. A new Lifeway research poll confirmed Wednesday that a majority of conservative evangelicals would vote for Satan, the Prince of Darkness, should he run for public office as a Republican candidate. The poll found that 72% of self-identified evangelicals would vote and even campaign for the Prince of Fallen Angels should he promise to promote Republican policies while in office.
That's awesome.
So is that kind of what you're saying? Is that your point?
I'm saying yes, absolutely. Like we don't really believe. Okay, and also your reasoning is excellent if we're just talking about the actual system.
Yeah.
My the point of that is of the actual sort of question is to expose that we're being inconsistent in our thinking.
Yeah.
Because what makes something fair is that an outcome could go either way. So, for instance, when I agreed to sit down with my children and play a game, Poitras talks about this. There's this social covenant that says, okay, by its very nature, I could lose.
Sure.
By its very so
The game is structured such.
The game is structured such. So then that governs my thinking. Mm-hmm. So if I get upset that I lose, maybe I get upset that I personally lose, but not that the other person won, because that's a possibility. So if you actually got upset that the other person won, what you're saying in the social contract is the only reason why I agreed to play is because I thought you were going to lose and I was going to win.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
I see your point.
Yeah,
I think for me personally, I think with the question, if I had to go with yes or no,
yeah.
I'm still going to stick with. I'm going to put the weight on the other side, but I see that point. It didn't register with me, but I see your point.
Okay, so my point is.
So you staying with, because you answered it with a yes.
No,
you said no.
I said no. I said I don't think if I don't think we really truly believe in fair, open elections if we're not willing that the other side could win. And by winning I mean when they win, we just say, hey, we're going to do a better job of presenting ideas that we think are slightly better.
Don't you think most, even with all their screeching, still think that way and function that way? I mean, even the left, who are going bonkers right now, they are strategizing how they're going to get this guy out of office next time. Or is it the way they're doing it that's such a concern to you?
It's not so much a left-right thing. I mean, I structured the question that way, but... Yeah. For me, this goes to the deeper problem we have as people, in which we're really walking around thinking that we're right on everything. Mm-hmm. And even when we sit down to have honest conversations, the only reason why we're sitting down to have conversation is less about what's true and more about hoping that we get people to join our side. And one of the things, let me just back up and say this. One of the things I appreciate about having conversations with you and with a few other people in my life is I don't get that sense. Now, I do get the sense that you know what you believe, but I get the sense that when I sit down, we're going to have a conversation. I might walk away with my mind changed, and you might honestly walk away with your mind changed because you're going to give it a fair hearing. Yeah. That's part of who you are, and that's a part of who I try to be. When I sit down and I listen, I can say, okay, I missed that. Thank you, and then just kind of leave it that way. But if we go into discussions where we're just like, okay, tacitly, we're like, okay, I really hope this person changes their mind, and then it's like, are you being disingenuous in even starting the conversation? Like, why bother at that point?
This harkens back to the illustration of the 10 people in a room from different worldview, ideologies, religions.
Right.
If no one is willing to treat their neighbor as themselves, everyone will be on their little bubbles.
Yeah.
You'll never. All of us have to go. Either everybody else we're all wrong. I could be wrong. 9 out of the 10 are wrong. You have to come to a point where you say, in order to help this situation, we have to communicate. And we have to be open to really working through issues. And so, it was back in my early 20s. I tried, as kind of a Jonathan Edwards resolution. I think that's a good one. Podcast Lesson for Life, number 325. How do we want to frame this? It needs to be something like, we must be willing to lay down our dogmatism, at least to the degree that we stand in another person's shoes and see the argument from their perspective. You may still think it's utter garbage,
Right.
but you have to at least step outside and go, okay, I see where you're coming from. I see what you're saying, and I'm willing to entertain the evidence.
Right.
You know, I may think you're totally biased with the evidence or skewing the evidence, but if you don't, none of us get anywhere.
Yeah.
And the game's fixed.
Yeah.
And the game's fixed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, is this a good place to end?
I think it is a good place to end. We'll have to pick up. We were planning on getting back to Grudem and Poitras talking about lying.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
we can pick that up another time.
We could
probably do it in 15 minutes.
Yeah, we could probably as a part of the never-ending conversation, we could continue.
Well, it's
All
been
right.
a joy, friend.
Any words of wisdom before we end?
Ooh. Keep your kids close.
Well said.
Alex.
What in the world did you do?
Someone has to make him talk, or they're gonna die.
We're not gonna help Keller, but we won't stop him either. Let him do what he needs to.
I know you know where they are.